32 years old, ruler of 20 million people, Alexander the Great lay dying in Babylon. His generals stood around his bed, waiting to carve up the world. Outside, his veteran soldiers wept. Then his eyes opened. In our timeline, Alexander died in 323 BC, and his massive empire shattered into decades of bloody civil war. But what if he lived? If Alexander survives Babylon, the world changes forever. His next target was already planned: Arabia. He wanted to sail around the peninsula, building massive ports to connect India with Egypt. With his army intact, he conquers the trade routes in months. Next up, Rome. In 323 BC, Rome was just a small regional power, fighting basic wars in Italy. Alexander's massive fleet and battle-hardened phalanxes would have crushed the Roman Republic before it ever became an empire. There would be no Caesars. Instead, we get a global Greek empire stretching from Carthage to India. Alexander wasn't just a destroyer. He forced his generals to marry local women to blend cultures. He built libraries, funded science, and opened massive trade routes. With him alive, the Library of Alexandria grows twice as fast. Roman concrete, Greek math, and Persian wealth combine. We might have reached the Industrial Revolution 1,000 years early. But keeping this together is almost impossible. Alexander had no clear heir. The moment he dies of old age, the civil war still happens. It is just far more destructive. Did we lose a golden age of science and unity? Or did a lucky fever save the world from a global tyrant? Let me know in the comments. This episode is a work of speculative historical fiction inspired by real historical events. The alternate timeline that follows is entirely fictional and created for entertainment and discussion. Alexander the Great died at 32. At least, that's what your history textbook says. But what if the fever in Babylon never actually killed him? What if the greatest empire on Earth did not collapse? It is June 323 BC. Babylon is dead quiet. Outside the palace gates, thousands of battle-hardened veterans stand in total silence. These men marched from Greece to India. They survived impossible battles, but they have no idea how to face this. Inside, Alexander is burning up. The fever has drained him so much he cannot even lift his head. His top generals stand around the bed: Perdiccas, Ptolemy, Seleucus. These men conquered kingdoms together. Now they are watching their empire die. The royal doctors have tried everything: cold wraps, sacred prayers, toxic herbal drinks. Nothing works. Alexander is slipping away. Outside, people are whispering about poison. They think the gods have abandoned them. Then, right before sunset, an old doctor from the eastern provinces shows up. He has no fancy tools, no royal robes, just a small leather bag of herbs from the mountains past Persia. The palace guards block him. The royal doctors laugh. They say they have already tried everything. The old man looks them in the eye. He says, "Then let me try the one thing you have not." After a long silence, they let him in. He carefully prepared a bitter mixture, unlike anything the Macedonian doctors had seen before. It was made from plants rarely found west of the Hindu Kush. Alexander drank only a few mouthfuls before falling asleep once again. Minutes turned into hours. Right before dawn, the fever broke. His breathing slowed down. His skin cooled. A doctor touched his forehead and gasped. The heat was gone. As the sun rises, Alexander opens his eyes. He looks at his shocked generals and smiles. Sorry to keep you waiting. The room went wild. Officers are crying and hugging. A messenger ran into the streets screaming that the king lives. Shops close, temple bells ring, thousands cheer. But inside the palace, everything changed. The fever did something no army ever could. It reminded Alexander that he is mortal. For the first time, he stopped thinking about the next war. He looked at his map. It stretched from Greece to India. He told his generals that they conquered faster than they learned to govern. He said, "If I die tomorrow, this empire dies with me." And everyone in that room knew he was right. And then he stopped planning his next invasion. Instead, he rewrote the rules of the world. He stripped power from greedy local warlords. He set up a central council. He fixed the tax system and built a massive road network to move information faster than ever. He forced his generals to study engineering. He forced his engineers to study philosophy. He realized an empire survives through structure, not fear. Then he did the unthinkable. He named an official successor and set up a council of advisors to rule under written laws. He turned his war machine into a functioning state. History remembers Alexander as a conqueror because he died young. But in this world, he became a founder. As caravans ride out of Babylon to spread the news, they carry 3 words: "The king lives." The empire everyone expected to shatter is actually just getting started. The fever was gone, but Alexander the Great was no longer the same man. That illness taught him something no battlefield ever could. Time was the only enemy he could never defeat. For the first time in his 32 years of life, he began planning not just for the next battle, love made a second break, but for the next generation. Yet one final conquest still called to him: Arabia. To the generals in Babylon, it seemed like an impossible suicide mission. A vast peninsula of scorching deserts, hostile independent tribes, and mysterious coastlines stretching toward seas no Greek had ever mapped. Most of his inner circle questioned the sanity of the plan. Ptolemy spoke up first. He said, "We have conquered Persia. We have reached India. What is left to prove?" And Alexander just smiled. "This campaign is not about proving anything," he said. "It is about connecting the world." Those words puzzled everyone in the room. Then Alexander unrolled a massive leather map. He pointed to the Arabian Peninsula, then to Egypt, then Babylon, and finally India. "Every caravan, every ship, and every road meets right here," he said. "If we unite these routes, we unite civilizations." Preparations began that very night. But this campaign looked completely different from his previous wars. Instead of just assembling soldiers, Alexander gathered engineers, mapmakers, shipbuilders, astronomers, doctors, linguists, and geographers. Entire caravans carried surveying tools instead of heavy siege towers. Libraries packed more scrolls than weapons. Alexander no longer marched simply to conquer. He marched to understand. In the spring of 322 BC, the imperial expedition crossed into northern Arabia. The first few weeks were brutal. Endless heat, towering sand dunes, and water that was worth more than gold. Yet, local guides led the Macedonians through hidden oasis routes known only to desert tribes. Alexander refused to treat these people as enemies. Instead, he invited tribal leaders directly into his camp. They shared meals, exchanged gifts, and compared maps. Many expected demands of surrender. Instead, Alexander offered alliances. Communities that joined the empire kept their traditions. Their leaders kept their power. Trade flourished under imperial protection. and resistance faded surprisingly fast. The campaign became one of diplomacy rather than bloodshed. As the army advanced southward, they encountered bustling caravan cities linking Africa, Arabia, Persia, and India. Markets overflowed with frankincense, myrrh, rare spices, ivory, gold, and exotic fabrics never before seen in Greece. Alexander walked through these markets without royal guards or ceremony. He spent hours speaking with local merchants, learning new languages, and asking endless questions about distant lands beyond the sea. One elderly navigator showed him something extraordinary. It was a chart describing seasonal monsoon winds across the Indian Ocean. The old sailor explained that the winds always return, and if you understand them, the sea becomes a road. Alexander studied the map carefully. He immediately understood its massive importance. The oceans were no longer barriers. They were highways waiting to be explored. He ordered copies of every navigation chart to be sent to Alexandria, Babylon, and Athens. Within months, imperial shipyards began constructing larger ocean-going vessels. These were not built for war, but for exploration. Meanwhile, engineers surveyed the Arabian coastline. New harbors were built, lighthouses rose above rocky cliffs, and freshwater reservoirs supported growing settlements. Caravan roads became paved imperial highways. Trade accelerated beyond anyone's expectations. Merchants traveling from India could now reach Egypt faster than ever before. Ideas traveled alongside silk and spices. Astronomy, mathematics, medicine, agriculture. Every culture contributed something. Every civilization learned something. The empire became less Greek and more universal. One evening, Alexander climbed a cliff overlooking the Arabian Sea. Beside him stood his trusted officer. Below them, hundreds of ships rested peacefully in the harbor. The officer asked, "Will there always be another land to conquer?" Alexander looked toward the endless horizon and replied, "No, but there will always be another people to understand." Those words spread throughout the empire. By the end of the campaign, Arabia had joined the empire through cooperation, not destruction. The ancient world had become smaller, more connected, and more curious. Alexander returned to Babylon not as a simple conqueror, but as a ruler who believed that lasting greatness came from bringing civilizations together. And as celebrations echoed through the capital, his scholars quietly prepared maps of lands still unknown. Beyond Arabia, beyond India, beyond every horizon yet imagined, the greatest expedition in history had not ended. It had only changed direction. Alexander the Great conquered the known world by age 30. But his biggest victory wasn't a battle. It was a network of schools. After taking Egypt, Babylon, and Persia, he realized something. You cannot hold an empire together with spears alone. You need a common purpose. And he decided that purpose would be knowledge. He built imperial academies from Greece all the way to India. These were not basic schools. They were massive research hubs, each one specialized in a different field. Babylon focused on astronomy. Alexandria took medicine. Greece did philosophy. For the first time in history, students traveled thousands of miles across open borders. A mathematician from Egypt could study in Babylon. An Indian surgeon could teach in Alexandria. It was the ancient world's first open-source network. To make this work, Alexander passed a law. Every city had to run a house of translation. If a book existed in Greek, Aramaic, Persian, or Sanskrit, it had to be copied into all the other languages. Knowledge was no longer locked behind a language barrier. It belonged to everyone. Within 10 years, science exploded. Indian mathematicians shared new calculation methods. Persian astronomers mapped the stars. Greek thinkers debated ethics with Babylonian scholars. Nobody was treated as second class. Alexander even attended these debates, not as a king, but as a student. During one debate in Babylon, an elderly Indian philosopher spoke up. He said the strongest ruler is not the one who inspires fear, but the one who inspires trust. The room went silent. The generals waited for Alexander to get angry. Instead, he smiled. He said he still had much to learn. Those words were carved into the entrance of every single academy. At the same time, the economy boomed. Alexander built roads connecting the Mediterranean to India. He set up relay stations. Messages that used to take 6 months now arrived in 3 weeks. Taxes went down because trade went up. Villages turned into cities. Families moved freely across regions. Children grew up speaking 3 languages. They did not call themselves Persian or Greek anymore. They called themselves citizens of the empire. One night, in Babylon, Alexander called his generals to look at a map. The map did not show army bases, forts, or borders. It showed schools, roads, ports, and libraries. His top general looked confused. He asked why there were no military positions on the map. Alexander looked at him and said, "Empires are not remembered for where their armies stood. They are remembered for what their people built." Silence filled the chamber. Every man present realized their king had become something history had never expected. Not merely the greatest conqueror, but perhaps the greatest builder, far beyond the empire. Neighboring kingdoms watched carefully. Many had expected Alexander's realm to collapse after his illness. Instead, it grew stronger every year. Not through fear, but through cooperation. Even former enemies requested alliances. They wanted access to the roads, the ports, the academies, the libraries. The empire had become something far more valuable than territory. It had become an idea. Standing on his balcony in Babylon, Alexander looked at the crowded streets below. He saw merchants from India, scholars from Egypt, and musicians from Greece. They were all sharing one city. For the first time since leaving home, he realized his greatest victory had arrived. It did not happen on a bloody field. It happened when the age of conquest ended and the age of civilization began. Alexander the Great died in his bed. He was 60. No fever, no poison, no battlefield spear. For 30 years, everyone in the ancient world predicted the exact same thing. The moment Alexander dies, the empire burns. His generals will tear it apart. They expected a civil war that would make the previous conquests look like a skirmish. But it never happened. Instead, the largest empire on earth transferred power without a single drop of blood. This is how he did it. Alexander looked at his scars in the mirror. He was an old man now. His hair was silver. He lived in his palace in Babylon and watched caravans arrive from Greece, Egypt, Persia, and India. The empire was massive. It was held together by one currency and standard weights. Banditry was almost gone. Roads were safe. But Alexander knew the biggest threat to this peace was his own death. He had read history. He knew that when a strong king dies, the sons and generals kill each other for the crown. He refused to let his life work become a graveyard. So, years before his heart stopped, he did something no conqueror had ever done. He summoned everyone to Babylon. Not just his generals. He brought governors, judges, scholars, merchants, and religious leaders from every single conquered province. Thousands of people packed into the palace. For weeks, the debates were brutal. The generals wanted the army to pick the next king. The royalists wanted pure bloodlines. Everyone was terrified of what would happen when Alexander was gone. Finally, the aging king stood up. He told them his empire must never depend on one single man. It must depend on laws. He forced them to sign the Imperial Charter of Babylon. This document changed history. It created a strict system. The heir had to spend years training in administration first. A permanent council would manage the transition. Provincial leaders had to vote to confirm the new king. Most importantly, the generals had to swear loyalty to the charter, not to a person. His old generals hated it. One veteran walked up to Alexander and asked if he really trusted pieces of paper more than soldiers with swords. Alexander smiled and said he trusted people when they all agreed to play by the same rules. He had the charter carved into massive stone pillars. He put them in every major city. Everyone could see the rules. Even the governors were bound by them. When Alexander finally closed his eyes for the last time, the entire world held its breath. Temples rang their bells. Markets closed. Caravans stopped in the middle of the desert. Everyone waited for the first general to march his army on Babylon. But the army did not march. The council met. The provincial delegates voted. The heir took the throne. The generals stood down. No cities burned. No civil war started. The neighboring kingdoms had their armies lined up at the borders, waiting to invade a collapsing empire. Instead, they watched a peaceful transition of power. Historians now call this the first peaceful succession. It changed the ancient world. People realized the empire was stable. Trade actually increased. Cities grew richer because merchants knew the government would not collapse tomorrow. The empire no longer needed a military genius to survive. It just needed the laws he left behind. Years later, a young student visited Alexander's tomb in Babylon. Above the door, there was a simple inscription. It said he conquered the world, and then he taught it how to govern itself. That was his real victory. It was not Gaugamela or Issus. It was not defeating Darius or marching into India. His greatest achievement was building something that could survive without him. As the sun set over the Euphrates, the caravans kept moving, the schools stayed open, and the empire lived on. Peacefully, quietly, confidently. The dream that history expected to last a single generation had become a civilization. And soon, its influence would spread far beyond the ancient world. 500 years. That is how long Alexander the Great's empire lasted. Most empires crumble in a century. They get too big. They rot from the inside. But this one survived. It did not survive because it was peaceful. It faced massive rebellions. It faced brutal droughts and earthquakes. It survived because of a single piece of paper. The Imperial Charter. Every 50 years, they changed it. They stopped appointing governors for life. They gave power to local assemblies. They let trade councils make the rules. Power was not held by one man anymore. The empire stopped being a kingdom and became a shared civilization. Its biggest win was not on the battlefield. It was in the classroom. They built massive academies everywhere. Alexandria got medicine. Babylon got astronomy. Athens kept philosophy. Taxila got math. Memphis got engineering. Students did not need passports. They traveled freely between all of them. One discovery led to another. The Library of Alexandria grew into a monster. Thousands of scribes worked there every single day. They translated everything: Greek, Persian, Egyptian, Indian, Hebrew. If a book existed, they copied it. The library did not belong to one king anymore. It belonged to the world. Technology started moving fast. Watermills popped up on every river. Engineers built massive steel tools. Farms grew twice as much food. Famines disappeared. Then they changed ocean travel. Shipbuilders took Egyptian hulls, Greek sails, Phoenician navigation, and Indian wind maps. They smashed them together. They built ships that could cross oceans. They did not sail to conquer. They sailed to find new things. They mapped the coast of Africa. They found new trade routes. Every ship came back loaded with crops, inventions, and stories. Walk into any city back then. You would hear 20 languages in one market. Temples sat right next to libraries. People stopped saying they were from one tiny village. They started saying they were citizens of the world. One night in Babylon, an old teacher put 3 things on a table: a sword, a scroll, a compass. He asked his students which one changed the world the most. They argued for hours. Some said the sword. Some said the compass. Finally, a young girl picked up the scroll. The teacher asked her why. She said, "Without the scroll, we would never know how to use the other 2." The room went dead silent. The teacher just nodded. That became the empire's core belief. Wars started to fade away, not because people became nice, but because war became bad for business. Conflict cost too much. Peace made everyone rich. The empire still had an army, but they spent their money elsewhere. They built schools, hospitals, roads, and universities. Knowledge became their shield. By the year 1000, travelers from outside the empire could not believe their eyes. One writer wrote a letter home. He said, "I came looking for the world's greatest empire. Instead, I found the world's greatest classroom." Alexander wanted to conquer lands. His followers did something much better. They conquered ignorance. Every morning across the empire, kids opened books, doctors saved lives, and merchants crossed continents. And they did not stop. They kept pushing outward, not with soldiers, but with curiosity. Far across the ocean, an unknown continent was waiting. When they finally met, history would change forever. The year is 2026. Break time's 4 seconds. But not our 2026. This is a world where 2,300 years have passed since Alexander the Great survived his fever in Babylon. His empire never broke apart. It grew. It changed. Today, we call it the Hellenic Commonwealth. From space, Earth looks exactly the same. Blue oceans, white clouds, green continents. But underneath those clouds, history took a completely different path. At the center of this world is Babylon. It is not some dusty pile of ruins for tourists. It is a massive, living metropolis. Ancient stone walls stand right next to giant towers of glass and steel. The Euphrates River still cuts through the middle of the city. Modern bridges connect neighborhoods built over 23 centuries. The old royal palace is now the Hall of the Commonwealth. The actual throne room where Alexander sat is the Assembly of Nations. Representatives from all over the world meet under the very same ceiling where Alexander planned his wars. But this is not an empire anymore. Nobody rules by force. It is a massive federation of self-governing regions. They share laws, trade, and schools. An elected council runs the daily business, while a ceremonial king from Alexander's bloodline keeps the tradition alive. No single person has all the power. Just as Alexander wanted, there is unity without forcing everyone to be the same. Education is the real backbone of this society. Every single child learns at least 3 languages. They learn Greek, their local language, and one more global language. Students must spend part of their school years living in a different province. If you grow up in Greece, you might spend a year studying in India. Learning about other cultures is treated just as seriously as learning math. The ancient dream of bringing different peoples together is just normal daily life. The Great Library of Alexandria is still there. Over 2,000 years, it grew into the biggest research center on Earth. Its underground archives go on for miles. They still keep the original paper books safe. But next to them, quantum computers store every scientific discovery ever made. Visitors still enter through marble halls inspired by the original library founded in antiquity. Above the entrance are the words, "Knowledge belongs to all." Medicine here is incredibly advanced. Hospitals use supercomputers mixed with 2,000 years of global medical secrets. Diseases that used to wipe out cities are completely gone. Most people live past 100 years. When a scientist makes a breakthrough, they share it with the whole world immediately. They believe knowledge only grows when you give it away. Transportation is incredibly fast. High-speed magnetic trains connect Athens, Babylon, Alexandria, and Persepolis. A trip that used to take months on a horse now takes just a few hours. The routes mapped out by Alexander's army are now the tracks for the fastest trains on Earth. Even space travel is different. Instead of countries racing and fighting to get to space first, the Commonwealth works together. The very first city built on Mars is named Alexandria Nova. Right in the middle of the Red Desert, there is a bronze statue of Alexander. He is not holding a sword. He is holding a book. The metal plate underneath says, "The greatest conquest is understanding." Back on Earth, cultures did not disappear. They mixed. Greek theaters sit next to Persian gardens. Indian festivals fill the main streets of Babylon. One afternoon, a group of school kids visits the main museum in the capital. In the center of the room sits a simple wooden bed. It is the bed where Alexander recovered from his deadly fever. A young boy looks at it and asks his teacher why a plain wooden bed is so important. The teacher smiles and says, "Because history changed right here, when one man got more time." Outside, the city is buzzing. Scientists are working in labs. Artists are painting in the streets. Families are walking by the river. Almost nobody stops to think about how close this world came to never happening. Only the history books remember that this entire civilization exists because one man's fever broke. The world is united not by war, but by curiosity. It shows us that the biggest victories do not happen on battlefields. Sometimes they start in a quiet room where history decides to give one person another day. A federation of self-governing regions, united by shared institutions, common laws, and centuries of cooperation. No single ruler governs alone. An elected imperial council works alongside a ceremonial monarch descended from Alexander's family. History remembers the big names: Alexander, Caesar, Genghis Khan, Napoleon. We think of them as the giants who shaped continents. But history is not actually built by great people alone. It is built by millions of forgotten moments, a road finished on time, a law written down, a discovery shared, a life unexpectedly saved. Tonight, we looked at one of those moments. A single fever, a single recovery, a single sunrise in Babylon that changed everything. Could it really have happened? Nobody knows for sure. Alexander the Great, dying at 32, is still one of history's biggest mysteries. Scholars still fight over what killed him. Some say it was malaria or typhoid. Others think it was a bad lung infection. Some even whisper about poison, though we have no real proof. What we do know is that his death shattered the ancient world. His empire broke into pieces overnight. His generals turned on each other. The world split. But inside this archive, the story went another way. Alexander survived his fever. He made a choice to stop fighting and start building. His empire became a global civilization. His real legacy was not conquered land, it was connection. Maybe that is the real lesson. Empires rise through brute force, but they only last when they build institutions, libraries, courts, schools, and when they learn from other cultures instead of destroying them. If you walk into the Great Library of Alexandria in this timeline, it is the largest archive on Earth. Millions of books are piled high. Thousands of languages are spoken under one roof. Centuries of science are saved here. But right in the middle of the main hall, under thick protective glass, there is a simple object. It is a faded leather bag. The exact one carried by the unknown doctor who saved Alexander. No gold on it, no diamonds, no royal crowns. Children often stop and stare. One little girl asks her grandfather, "Did this really change history?" The old man smiles gently. He kneels down to her level and says, "Maybe. But history usually changes because ordinary people do extraordinary things." The child looks once more at the old satchel, then smiles. Outside, the modern city of Alexandria is alive and moving. High-speed trains glide across steel bridges. Students walk out of universities carrying tablets instead of weapons. Scientists prepare ships for trips to Mars. Cargo vessels cross oceans that used to divide us. Markets are filled with people speaking 50 different languages. Life goes on, not because humans stopped fighting forever, but because cooperation became more useful than war. Our view pulls back, high above the city, above the blue Mediterranean, above Europe, Africa, and Asia. 3 continents, but now they share one civilization. Even higher now, Earth spins quietly against the black space. You cannot see any borders from up here. No lines in the dirt. Just rivers, mountains, and oceans. One single world. In the dark, an ancient book starts to close. The heavy parchment pages turn, one by one. The final page falls flat. A heavy bronze stamp presses into hot red wax. The seal of the hidden archives is set. This file is closed. Tonight, we imagined a world where Alexander lived to old age. Tomorrow, another forgotten path is waiting to be found. Because history is not just a list of things that happened. It is also the story of every path we did not take. Every split-second decision. Every close call. Every what if. They are all still waiting just on the other side of the page. Until next time, keep asking questions, Keep looking for the paths we missed. Keep searching past what the textbooks tell you. And never stop wondering, what if? Thank you for opening this file with us. Until our next trip into the archive, good night.